Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about something that went over my head the first time I read it, and it might have went over your head too, because quite honestly, it's kind of hard to understand in game. And what might I be talking about, you might ask? Well, it's the lore tab for the scatter signal fusion rifle that you get from Riven. As you can see here, it's just a bunch of numbers, but they're hexadecimal numbers. And so, all you have to do is just go onto light.gg, copy and paste into a numbers to letters translator, and you get this. A churning singularity of shadows and mimicry beats again within cultivated chaos. Minds orbit its gravity to bridge communion with a voice, to move from parallel entanglement. They dream of a dark core contained within a timeless structure, a suspended return to the primordial. If not for this truth, why kneel? If not for this truth, why does it elude definition? Though not all agree on all agree on this. Soul is salvation. So who could this be talking about? Who is this speaking right now to us? Well, I don't really think it's anybody else but the Witness. This is some more information about how the Witness is. As we all know, we found out in Season of the Deep that the Witness is a culmination of its entire species, all in one body. And I know that other people who have translated this lore have kind of tied this to being with the Vex, but it doesn't really make sense because the Vex are a hive mind. They don't try to be individuals. Now, another reason as to why I think that this is talking about the Witness is if we go line by line, the first line is talking about shadows and mimicry beating again within cultivated chaos. Now, one of the things that we first notice when we look at the Witness is the giant plume of clouds made of faces that are emanating from his head. Now, these could be seen as mimicry or mimics of his own face, maybe even a shadow, as I guess it would make sense because they are all the same species who generally look the same from what we can tell. So they would be mimics of one another. And cultivated through chaos, I believe, is referring to the darkness and how the species that makes up the Witness self-sacrificed and cultivated themselves through the ritual which brought about the Witness. And the next part is obviously referring to the different minds that make up the Witness and use the Witness as their voice. Now, I won't lie, the next part kind of had me stumped, but this is where I kind of had to do a little bit of research on what this actually was. As it says here, they dream of a dark core contained within a timeless structure, a suspended return to the primordial. Now, upon looking up what a dark core actually is, because originally I thought it had something to do with space, according to this definition, a dark core or D factor can be defined as a general tendency to maximize one's individual utility while disregarding, accepting, or malevolently provoking disutility for others. This is accompanied by the beliefs that serve as justification for their actions. Now, with that definition in mind, I feel like we can attribute this to the Witness himself, as it's not like he malevolently provokes the disutility of others that serve him. Rather, it's that he disregards the disutility that beings like his disciples have before he gives them the darkness, which makes them useful to him. I feel like Rolk is a very good example of somebody who was once suffering from disutility, but then once he met the Witness, he became very useful to him and served him very well. We can also see this in beings like Callus, as Callus ultimately helped the Witness get one step closer to the final shape. And honestly, Callus could be seen as the reason why the Witness could even get into the Traveler and the Pale Heart in the first place. There is that first part of the dark core personality trait, however, that I mentioned, that being the individual's utility. As we know, the Witness itself is an individual, and as I've already mentioned before, all of the minds that orbit the Witness, they don't really agree all the time. They only really agree for sure on one thing, and that being soul is salvation, and their plan with the final shape, which makes sense for their species, considering what happened with the Traveler. But at the same time, could this be telling us something else about the Witness that we didn't really think of? Could the Witness be trying to seek individuality among the minds that orbit him? When I think of this situation and how the Witness is very similar to aliens like Alien X from Ben 10, if you guys even remember that show, and I'm sure you do know who Ben 10 is, a lot of you guys might remember what Alien X is and how it works, and if you don't know, then I'll explain. Celestial sapiens are made up of multiple personalities, usually two, and they can't really act on their own until both parties agree. This is why it's such a troubling thing for Ben to use Alien X. Even though its power is very potent, it takes some time and convincing on both sides to let Ben use the powers of Alien X. Now, obviously, the situation isn't exactly the same, but it just kind of does remind me that these two are in a similar situation. Another reference that you guys might also understand is All for One in My Hero Academia. This kind of reminds me of that as well, because as we've seen from time and time again in the manga and in the anime, All for One's trying to use Shigaraki's physical body to enact his own will, while at the same time Shigaraki's trying to fight that part of All for One back and use the powers himself to do whatever he wants. Now, while there might be a more combative force in that example, there's still comparisons to be drawn, one mainly being individuality. And so maybe it's that the witness itself is dreaming of this dark core, but knows that it can't come into reality, or at least until the final shape comes about, at which point it could probably act as an individual, knowing that its goal, its only goal, is done. And so obviously this is just a theory of sorts from bits and pieces of information that I could gather from a very brief lore tab entry. So that's just my thoughts on the whole situation, and honestly it might be a shot in the dark, but with how little we know about the witness, it's probably the best I could come up with. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Sub up, stay safe, and peace.